Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. Today I will review a bunch of palettes that I have been trying out lately. So grab a snack or coffee because this will be a long video. I have to mention that this is not a ranking video because ranking videos is not my thing, and this is because my preferences can change by the day, so to say. For example, some days I'm really loving pastels and the next day I really want the most darkest eyeshadow that you possibly can find. So my vibe kind of changes all the time, so it's not fair for me to do those kind of ranking videos. But I will still review those palettes for you in no particular order. I'm not sure if all of those palettes will be in stock, but I will definitely try to check it up for you and put it up on the screen whether they are in stock or not, and price information and all that good stuff. And I will also put codes if I have any in the caption if you want to save a bit of money. Some of them are affiliated and some of them are not affiliated, and I will try to make sure that I will be clear about that in the captions. So the first palette I'm going to talk about is the Electrum Cosmetics Blood Moon palette. It's currently up for pre-order for a week, I think. I will put all the good info on the screen so you know about it. I received this in PR from the brand, obviously, since I have it before all of you. But I have to say that I'm always pleasantly surprised by the cool and innovative color stories that Electrum Cosmetics comes out with, and this one is no exception. I feel like this might be her most unique color story yet. It's like a half neutral, half colorful palette. It has really beautiful tones of teal, some darker reds, some brown mustard shades, and some super shifty multichromes, and one iridescent shade that you can use as a highlighter. I feel like this is a very versatile palette because you can use it on both your cheeks and your eyes and maybe lips if you are into that. As with most of Electrum Cosmetics color stories, this is going quite dark. I feel like it could be a little bit intimidating for people who aren't used to that. But for me personally, this is not a problem because I feel like the mattes are very buildable. You can just push a little bit in the crease and you can kind of decide the opacity or saturation of the shade if you are a little bit careful with the application. And something I like to do when I feel like I need to blend out the edges with a lighter color is to use either a white eyeshadow or a translucent powder to just blend out the edges a little bit more effortlessly. I don't feel like that is needed with the Electrum formula because those are really easy to build up and blend out on its own, but it's a tip if you are a little bit scared of those darker mattes. The mattes are the same formula as in the Midnight Mort palette, and I feel like it's a really good formula because it's not super pigmented, but you can really build it up as I mentioned earlier. This palette contains 5 multichromes, 5 mattes, 1 velvet eyeshadow and 1 holychrome eyeshadow. And as I usually mention in my reviews, I really love when brands includes different formulas in their palettes because it's so much more variety and you have so much more options from what you can do, and that's so awesome. Those multichromes are really opaque, but you can also tap them on with your finger and use them as topper if you apply them carefully. But I feel like they are doing the most when you apply them when they are fully opaque, to be honest, because they are so intense. Some of those shades are so shifty that it's almost hard to understand how they can be so shifty, and I feel that's the case with Electrum Cosmetics eyeshadows in general. So yeah, if you are into this color story, I would highly recommend it. So yeah, this palette is a hit in my book. I'm really excited to have it in my collection and I can't wait to use it some more. The next palette I'm going to talk about is the Simply Posh Cosmetics Coastal palette. It's such an interesting muted color story. 6 of the mattes are on the lighter side and 6 of the mattes are a little bit darker, so you can get that depth that I'm loving in my looks. And the shimmers are just spectacular. They are very sparkly, they are really shifty, and Simply Posh Cosmetics offers my favorite matte formula. It's so good. I can't stress enough how much I love it. And I really love the shimmers too. They are on the drier side, but that also means that they are super intense and sparkly. That is hard to find from other brands, I feel like. Simply Posh Cosmetics always go all in with the themes and their beautiful color stories, and I feel like this is one of my top favorite color stories from the brand because it's so different. I haven't seen any brand releasing something like this before, and the eyeshadow performs perfect. This is a bit off topic, but I just realized that I forgot to do my brows. Oh my, oh my. Anyhow, this palette is so good. I really recommend it if you are into the color story. The formula is superb. It's one of my favorites, and yeah, it's such a great palette. The next palette I'm going to talk about is the Mvndi Cosmetics Midsummer Moon's eyeshadow palette. It comes in such a cute packaging. I really love how innovative Mvndi Cosmetics usually are with their packaging. It's really cute, and they come with really cute messages inside them too. And the pans are, some of the pans in this palette is moon shaped, and it's such a cute detail in my opinion. The only problem with this kind of packaging is that it maybe can be a little bit hard to store, but I haven't found that problem yet. Alright, so when it comes to the color story, it's really interesting. It's really different from what Mvndi Cosmetics usually does. So I was really drawn to this color story when I first saw it because it's so interesting. The palette contains 4 velvety mattes, 2 luminous shimmers, 5 iridescent shifty shades, and yeah, it's just a very interesting color story as I mentioned earlier. The brand describes the formula as luminous shades, and I would personally describe it more as satin shades because they aren't super sparkly. They are still pretty, but they are not super intense. And I like use those kinds of shades on the lower lash line, on the inner corners, or even as mattes. Then we have this very interesting iridescent multichrome shades. They are really shifty, very sparkly, and really beautiful. You can either use them as a topper shade or you can apply them more opaque to get a more intense effect. I really like that because with those mattes that you already have in this palette, you can layer the shades and get so many different and unexpected color combos. I like how the palette is half purplish reddish toned, and on the other side is more greenish yellow, almost a little bit turquoise leaning, and that gives you a lot of different options. You can both go a little bit more almost neutral, or you can go very purplish or monochromatic. I think that Mvndi Cosmetics has done an excellent job with this color story. It's really shifty. I feel like those shimmers are the best that the brands has come out with yet, and they are really beautiful and intense. The matte performs excellent. It's such a great formula to work with. It's easy to layer the shades, and they are really pigmented without being too pigmented. So yeah, I really enjoy this palette. I don't really have anything negative to say about this palette, to be honest, but maybe if I'm going to say something, I would maybe replace the satin shades with more of those iridescent shades. But it's not a big problem for me because I still get use of those shades. But I know that in general most people aren't into satin shades. Next up is the revamped Salem Cosmetics Perfect Happiness and the Love is Blood. I will talk about those palettes together because they come from the same brand and both are revamped. And those palettes are really good, the color stories are excellent, but since I own the original palettes, I don't know which ones I prefer, to be honest. It's really hard for me to pick a favorite if I prefer the original or the new ones, because there is different things that I like about both versions. For example, in the Love is Blood, I think I prefer the original yellow matte shade, and I also prefer the packaging. It was a little bit more luxurious in my opinion. But on the other side, I feel like some of the shimmers in those palettes are a lot better than in the original palette. So it's really hard to decide, but either way, those palettes are really nice. The mattes are really pigmented, blends perfectly fine. The shimmers are super intense and sparkly as we are used to from Salem Cosmetics. So yeah, I think that you will be happy with those palettes if you are interested in those color stories. Next up is the Geodes palette from WhatsUp Beauty. This is such a beautiful half colorful, half neutral palette that I think can really make people who are a little bit afraid of using color step their toes into color. But I still love it because it has those interesting tones that I like. For example, the shade Clay is a greenish, muted military army shade that I really love to put in my crease. And then there is very intense shimmers. They are really bright and they are very shifty and sparkly and beautiful. I really enjoy the WhatsUp Beauty formula, both the mattes and the shimmers. And what's really interesting about those mattes is that when you first look at them in the pan, you don't expect them to do that much, but they are actually really buildable, so you can get a very intense effect if you want to, and that's something I really appreciate because I like depth in my looks, and I have said it so many times, but it's so important for me, and this means that I don't really need to reach for another palette when I'm using the Geodes palette, and that's so awesome in my opinion. The shimmers are really intense and sparkly. Maybe they could crease on someone who has oily lids, but I haven't had any issues with that personally, so I can't speak on that. Some of the shades you can use as a highlighter on the cheeks, and I think that's really lovely. This is my second favorite from the brand when it comes to color story, because I really love the Dragon eyeshadow palette a little bit more, but this is still a very beautiful palette that has those interesting pops of yellows and greens and purple, and yeah, it's really beautiful. But I think for me personally, I would like one more different kind of matte for it to be the top favorite color story for me personally, but it's a really nice color story, I can't deny that. I also love the sleek and slim format, which makes those palettes really easy to store, so to say, and yeah, just a good palette. Next up we have a collaboration palette between Mvndi Mvkevp and Jacob. I will put his username on the screen. The palette is called A Few of Our Favorite Things. It has such a beautiful packaging. I really love how it looks like. I have to be honest, when I first saw the color story I was like, it's a little bit intimidating even for me who likes bold eyeshadow looks, and I mean, I have a very specific style when I do my makeup, and this is a little bit out of my comfort zone, to be honest. But as soon as I started to use it, I was so blown away by the different possibilities. It really inspired me in a different way that I wasn't expecting, to be honest. It's honestly such a happy surprise because it's so interesting, and I think it has to do with the interesting and different duochromes and multichromes that is in this palette, because when you look at the palette you don't always see all the different possibilities before you have swatched it or when you have used it on the eyes. This was definitely a hit in my book, and I'm so happy to say that, because at first I was a little bit afraid of this color story. Something that really helps with this color story is that it contains a rainbow iridescent pan, and that means that you have almost endless possibilities for what you can do with this palette, and I think that's why I love it so much. Something that is really special with Mvndi Mvkevp's eyeshadow palettes is that they always contains a ton of different eyeshadow formulas, and this palette is no exception. It contains 6 different formulas, and I think that's really fantastic because it gives you so many different options. It's such a special eyeshadow palette, not only because it's a collab between Mvndi and Jacob, but also because it surprised me in such a positive way. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I do, and I'm so excited for them to have this collaboration, and I'm so excited to continue to use this palette because I have had so much fun with it already. Congratulations, my friends. I'm so proud of you. And then we have the Beauty Moon Cosmetics Once Upon a Time palette. And if you have seen my other videos with reviewing this brand, I mentioned that I felt like I wish that the brand could include some more mattes in their palettes. And the owner really took this feedback to her heart, and now we have a palette full with mattes. So I'm super excited and happy that she listened to feedback from her customers and creators who works with her. That's just so great. And color story wise, it's actually really interesting. It has some really sparkly shimmers and some really interesting matte shades. The mattes aren't the most pigmented, but they definitely work well on the eyes, and you can build them up to an extent, I would say. But the shimmers in this palette is the star of the show, I would say. But you can't buy this palette and expect to love it if you don't love purple or blues, because it's quite blue heavy and purple heavy, but I personally really like it. I think that Mvndi Cosmetics really nailed it when it comes to the color story, because it really represents the whole vibe of the palette and the packaging, and it's such an interesting and beautiful palette. I have to say that it's my favorite palette from the brand so far, but I actually have one palette in my collection that I'm going to try out very soon that I suspect is going to be my new favorite, but I can't say it already now. Anyhow, it's a really beautiful palette. I feel like those shimmers aren't super creamy, so if you have oily lids you will probably be able to use those shimmers without getting any creasing. And yeah, it's a beautiful palette. And last but not least, we have the collaboration between Makeup Ritualz and Spanageltheanimal. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but I have no idea how to say that. This palette, my friends, is so up my alley. It's so beautiful, and I especially was into this color story during the summer. I still love it a lot, but I feel like this is the perfect summer color story, if you get what I mean. The palette contains 10 matte shade, 1 foil shade, 1 duochrome and 3 multichromes. As I said in so many times before, I love when a palette has a lot of different formulas. It just makes the palette worth it to me. I have to be honest, this is the best color story and the best formula that Makeup Ritualz has ever come out with, and I hope that they will continue to use this fantastic formula because it's so easy to work with. The mattes are outstandingly good. They are really pigmented, they blend so well, and the shimmers are really well curated. I'm really fascinated by the interesting color choices in this palette. It's so beautiful. The only critique I have towards this palette is that I wish that there was maybe one more darker shade, because the darker purples and pinks in this palette isn't going deep enough, and sometimes I don't always want a brown in my outer corners, but that's such a small problem. I can just use whatever palette I own or a single shadow to pair it with this palette, and I have been so happy with the looks I've been creating with these palettes on its own, so it's not a big deal for me personally. So yeah, I highly recommend this palette. And this was everything for this time, my friends. I hope that you did enjoy it, and please consider to subscribe if you're into indie makeup, colorful makeup, or just want to see me blabbering about everything. Hope to see you soon. Bye bye. Midsummer, what is it called? Next to especially the shade Lune. Oi. I think this palette contains velvet eyeshadow. Basically every mentions, and as I always mention, it's 5 holochromes. No, collaborate, and the rest of the palette contains 12 beautiful eyeshadows. No. The palette contains 12 beautiful, a little bit darker shade, but inside story you can come too luminous. It would have, but I'm not sure how to. It's really, oh my gosh, I don't know how to pronounce this. And then